Hey everybody, I'm Adam,
I'm Stephanie.
and we're here to review Heroes Wanted by Action Phase Games. Very fancy. Heroes Wanted is a competitive 2 to 5 player superhero game where you move your superheroes around on a board and fight off the villain, fight off his henchmen and his underlings, and fight the other heroes. The story behind it is basically you are D-list superheroes, like terrible superheroes, think Mystery Men the movie, trying to make it onto a C-list superhero team in Zeta City. And so all the heroes are really like bizarre. You don't have Superman in this. You have other ones, which we'll get to. The way the game basically works is that you have a hand of cards that say all the things you can do, and it's a set hand of cards. Everyone has the same ones, and you get one special one depending on what kind of hero you are. But then every time you play a card, it goes in your discard pile, and you can rest to get the cards back. But you also have to use the cards to defend against things. And so it's not random at all. The cards you have in your hand are the cards you have in your hand. You have to plan out, well, I'm going to take 7 damage, so I'll save this card that'll block 7 damage, and then I'll use this power next, and then I'll rest the next turn. And you have to kind of plan it all out. So it's an interesting kind of combination. And you're all running around the board at the same time, trying to fight also the random villain. And there's a bunch of different tasks you're trying to accomplish, and whoever has the most victory points at the end wins. Did I miss anything?
Sounds about right.
Okay. You will get into a little bit more of the explanation as we go here and talk about it, but we're going to review it, and we have a special way of reviewing things here at the Eclectic Gamer. The way we think about things is every game is for someone, right? Every game, someone would rate a 10. Every game, someone would rate a 1.
The designer's mom.
Designer's mom is always a 10. So there's always someone out there.
Yeah.
So we really try to think about what about that game would make people like it, and what would make it dislike it. And not everyone likes everything about every game either. So we find out all the attributes a game has, and then try to attach some numbers to those to figure out how well people will like them. So we're going to talk about some of those attributes the game has and how it might affect your enjoyment of it. And you can see if you'd like it for yourself, because I don't know. And if you want to get customized ratings like this for a bunch of board games, you can go to our website, tegratings.com, tegratings.com. You fill out sort of a profile and a survey, like a dating site, on how you feel about a bunch of different attributes, and we'll spit out a bunch of results based on the game profiles we've made. It'll give you some customized 1 to 10 ratings for these games. And if you really like it, you can go in and make your own game profiles and add to the community ratings and rate some of those games we haven't done yet. So let's talk about Heroes Wanted.
Sounds good.
I've been talking a lot, but I'm going to keep talking because I'm up
should.
first. It is, despite some of the silliness that it sounds, it is a heavy strategy game. You're trying to figure out with this hand of cards, how am I going to accomplish these goals? And some goals will serve you better if you accomplish them before other heroes, and the other heroes are trying to take away the minions you're trying to get. And you know exactly what the villain's going to do, and you're trying to figure out what to do. So despite how silly your hero might be, which Stephanie's going to talk about, you're really trying to figure out the best way to use the cards that you have in your hand and your specific hero power to get through this mission and take down this villain. And there's a lot of strategy involved, despite how silly it sounds. There's going to be a lot of dichotomy in this game. It's super strategy, but it's also very silly, and there's a bunch of those we'll talk about. So why don't you talk about the silliness stuff so they know what I'm talking about here?
Sure. So playing Heroes Wanted, you play as a combination of heroes. You get an A card and a B card.
So, A and B.
For example, this character is Fancy Justice.
So you have a bottom and a top.
And
Fancy Justice.
They each have ridiculous pictures on the front of them.
Oh yeah, they're all crazy silly. And so
for example, Justice is blind.
Yeah. And who else we have?
We have the
Dr.
Yeti. The villains that you're fighting are equally ridiculous.
I liked the big bad clown myself. That was really fun.
That one was
and scary, right? Yeah.
So, and then in addition, each hero gets a quirk. So some of them are things like overly apologetic. Each time you KO a character, you have to apologize with sincerity. Another one is former sidekick. So every time somebody sitting to your left or right KOs a minion, you must offer them a high five.
You can't kick those sidekick roots, right?
No, exactly. So I think that these add a lot of silly components to an otherwise pretty heavy strategy game.
Yeah,
it's an interesting combination.
It is. The quirks are part of the gameplay. If you don't do it, you lose some points. But really, they're just kind of in there to give you something. It's optional too, I think, right?
I think it is optional. It's probably worth mentioning that even though it is a silly game, generally silly games tend to be shorter and take under an hour. That has definitely not been the case in any of our playthroughs.
I think it was one time when we all died a lot and then ended quickly, but and so this is where this part of this dichotomy comes. It's like it's very silly. So you randomly draw some of these character cards, and you get to choose what you want to be. Do you want to be Fancy Justice, or do you want to be Dr. Justice? And there's a bunch of different ways you can deal it out, and there's all these different combinations. And you can see you get some silly ones. So then, as I was talking about the strategy games, there's two different concepts we have on the Eclectic Gamer that we thought long and hard about, and those are the concept of randomness in a game and what we call consistency. And so consistency is if the more you play a game, the better you get at it, you can consistently beat someone else. You can consistently perform because of your experience. Games like chess, very consistent, right? You go play in Washington Square Park in New York and you're going to get trounced. I haven't played them, but Agricola and Caverna I've heard, very much so. Once you know how they work, you're going to do much better. And a lot of times games that aren't random tend to be very consistent because the only factor is experience. But there are games that are very random, and they're also consistent. Poker is very random and also very consistent because you see the same people getting the world championships of poker multiple years in a row. Even Magic the Gathering, very random because you don't know what you're going to draw. Sometimes you roll dice. There's things like that. Race for the Galaxy, very random, but also very consistent because if you know what you're doing, you can kind of work into it. Other games like Killer Bunnies or sometimes Small World, random things come up and you might get knocked out. They can be random and not consistent and inconsistent. So there's much of it. So again, this is something we've thought long and hard about, and this is how we decided it. But this game has very little randomness.
Yeah, you basically it's the cards that you're dealt out at the beginning that are random, but you still get a choice between those of what you're going to do. And from there on, there's only 4 scenarios in the base game, so you're playing the same scenarios. The minions and the henchmen always attack the same.
They always attack the same
always moves in a prescribed pattern. So none of those aspects are random. And even though each hero combination might be different, you're still one of 4 different hero types. So you'll have a similar set of goals and abilities that you're going for.
There's one type of hero, the vigilante, who rolls a dice, but that's the only thing, and it doesn't even actually change that much because it's usually 1, 2, 3, or 4, 5, 6, and so you can kind of count on it.
Yeah.
But the cards you play are all the same. You know exactly what the villains are going to do. The only kind of thing you don't know is what the other players are going to do, but that's not really random, right? That's reading people.
Right.
So it's very random. So it's also very consistent. If you know what you're doing, you can plan out your turn. You can do very well at it. Mm-hmm. And so this game has both of those. Like I said, games without much randomness tend to be very consistent, and this game is no exception.
Yes. One thing I wanted to talk about is that there is a form of resource management. You have a deck of cards. I believe it's 7 cards.
Yeah, you can get more.
Less than that, actually.
6 or 7.
6, something like that. Which are your actions, and once you play an action, you then can't use it until you are able to draw from or pick up the cards that you've discarded. So in that sense, and I should back up. Those cards that you're using to play actions are also your defense cards against attacks. So you do have to manage saying, okay, I'm going to play this as a defense. I'm going to play this as an attack.
So there's a card that's like strike, and allows you to hit someone as one of your actions. But you only have 2 or 3 cards that allow you to actually attack someone. But it's also got a 5 for its defense value, so
which is pretty high.
Which is pretty high, yeah. And so you kind of go, should I save that to defend because I know I'm going to take around this much damage, or should I use it to attack because I need an attack and I want to kill this guy and I can't kill that henchman, etc.
So when I play the game, I'm very heavily focused on my card management. So to me, I think that this game does include a component of resource management. Your resources being your cards. I think you disagree, but.
I actually, when I was making my game profile, you get to choose what attributes you think a game has. Not everyone's going to have the same. Stephanie and I agree quite usually. This is one we differed on a little bit. I thought about putting resource management into it, because I've had the same thought. I'm like, these cards are like a resource, and some of them have basically two different ways to spend them. You can spend them as an attack, you can spend them as a defense. You're trying to you gotta figure out how low can I go, how many cards can I use up before I have to rest and get all my cards back. But I wasn't quite sure. I could be convinced either way, but I decided not to. Stephanie put it in. It's an interesting one, actually.
Okay.
Then we're going to rapid fire through here some of the ones that aren't, just some of the more minor ones. It does have direct player interaction. You can attack other players. Some people don't like that. Some people think that makes the game much more fun. It actually does add a little more, not randomness, but a little more things to consider. You can gang up on someone because it's a consistent game. It does have a pretty strong theme. The theme is, superheroes, and at that, these silly superheroes. You're these terrible superheroes trying to make a slightly less terrible team. And that permeates throughout the characters. They have quotes, the quirks that make you do things because you're a former psychic, and that's why your tendencies have made you. That's what has made you unable to get on a superhero team, and so that's like all part of the theme. But
you're playing on a board that looks like a newspaper, and there are headlines you can complete to get.
Yeah, the goals are called headlines.
You're trying to achieve the most fame, so it's all.
So you can join. Yeah, so they'll pick you to join the team. Yeah, it's very thematic. And the last thing we said is it's a competitive game. You are competing against other people to win. But there is something.
It's worth noting. There is an expansion called Champions and Masterminds. I think, or at least this is volume 1 of this. It allows you to play cooperatively as opposed to competitively.
And you play as the big superheroes. Right?
Yeah, there's a couple of differences. One is that you're playing as one of the superheroes that are given to you on these cards. They have multiple superpowers on them instead of just the one you would get with your combination of cards. They have their own quirks that are related to their relatively elaborate backstories that have been written to them, and you're fighting similar, or you're fighting the same villains. So instead of that's not a villain, but here's a villain.
Headpin.
So instead of combining cards to make it, it's already written out for you. I think it's worth mentioning this expansion because I found that when we played it, it didn't detract significantly from the game the way that some other cooperative add-ons have been in other games. But you are losing the randomness and the interestingness of your randomly dealt superhero.
It's still silly, but it's a
villain.
little less silly.
There's a lot less headlines. I liked being able to go for headlines. You can't play, or there's hardly any headlines in the cooperative version. The quirks I don't think are as interesting because they're specifically tied to a character's backstory. And I mean, there's only a couple of heroes and a couple of villains, so you're going to be replaying things more frequently. And
when you have your own made up character with these random things, you kind of think of okay, how did a person get to be called Dr. Yeti? What's his backstory? He's overly apologetic, Dr. Yeti. You think about it and it's fun. And then these characters are kind of well developed by the action phase. There's definitely a story to it, but
they're silly, different. But they're not the same level of silly.
Yeah. So that's that. There's a cooperative version. In the system right now, we only handle the base game, but we thought we'd mention it in case anyone was interested in that. And the last one we wanted to note that was pretty important, we thought here, was variety. We kind of
we went back and forth.
We both went back and forth in both directions. We have an attribute called games with a lot of variety and games without much variety. I think at some point when trying to make this, I had both. Yeah. I had either
right.
one or the other. So the way in which it has a lot of variety is the characters, because the top and the bottom cards of them each give you something. The bottom half of the card gives you an ability that's always working, and the top half of it defines what your superpower is. Every character has a superpower card they can play, and it just says use your superpower. And that's what's on the board.
Superpower is different for each one of these cards.
And there are dozens and dozens of Hero A cards and dozens of Hero B cards. And so you could, because there's so many, you could literally play this game hundreds if not thousands of times and never have the same combination. Yeah. So in that way, it has a lot of variety.
And you're combining it with a quirk, which, again, there's tons of different quirks too. And same for the villains. Your villains' combinations will rarely ever be the same.
So in that way, there's a lot of variety. But the gameplay is pretty similar.
Yeah, so in the gameplay, you have 6 or 7, I don't remember, I should have looked this up before.
Number of cards in your hand.
Number of cards in your hand with different actions on it, and you play one, and then until you get to the point where you have to pick them back up. Yeah. You find yourself doing the same actions over and over and over again.
Same sequence. I'm going to attack with this, block with this, attack with this, block with this, draw my hand back.
So even though the setup had a lot of variety, the actual actions that you're taking during the game do not have a lot of variety.
There's also only 4 different scenarios in the game, and you can change which headlines are in those scenarios, but it's still only 4 because they're actually printed on the board, so that doesn't change as much. So in those ways, there's not a lot of variety. Mm-hmm. It's actually lacking in variety. So I eventually just put neither of them on there.
Same, yeah.
I was either considering neither or both, and I might go back and change it, but
I put neither. It didn't make sense to me to have both lot and no variety.
It's a very odd one. This is a game of dichotomies. It has a lot of variety and no variety.
It's silly, but it's heavy in strategy.
Yeah, it's super heavy strategy. It's like a Euro. It's very weird. So again, it's we don't know if you'll like this game. I don't know if I like this game at this point.
I like it.
You like it?
I know I like it.
So based on
strategy games, I like silly games.
That's true.
It meets it for both. If you really want a heavy strategy game, this is probably not the game for you.
Yeah. No, I tend to enjoy it playing because I like the silliness. It's fun, but I also like something I can dig my teeth into a little bit. Just based on our 2 game profiles, it's giving me a 9.5 right now. And I tend to like almost every game. It's very hard to find a game that I don't like, so my ratings tend to skew very high. But that's correct, because I like a lot of games.
Right. So. And mine's a 7.5, which I think is pretty accurate.
She's a little more pessimistic. So even though it sounds like she likes it more, I think we're probably about the same. We both enjoy it quite a bit.
It's because, in comparison to the number of other games I like, it's actually pretty high on my list.
That's true. It's still probably in the teens for somewhere for me. This might be 9.5.
Yeah, right.
That's not that far. It's in the top 10 probably. But anyway, that is Heroes Wanted. So you've heard a lot about this system, and again, we'd like you to check it out and tell us what you think. See what your score will be when you put it in. So again, you can go to tegratings.com, tegratings.com. It'll allow you to fill out your profile, fill out all these attributes we talked about: strategy, silly, games without much randomness, consistent games, and much more. And then based on all those scores, it'll give you a rating for Heroes Wanted, and then a bunch of other games too. All you got to do is enter your preferences once, and it'll spit out a whole bunch of ratings for you. And if you really like the system, which we hope you do, we need people to enter and create game profiles for the games we haven't played yet. We play a lot of cooperative games.
Right, yeah.
And we don't play a lot of the more heavy strategy games. Mm-hmm. So, of the top, games on Board Game Geek, we haven't played Twilight Struggle, Caverna, Agricola. I haven't played enough Power Grid to rate it. So a lot of the top games on there, we don't have experience playing. I could make a rating for Power Grid, but I only played it once or twice, and I don't feel like I know it well enough to do it. But you guys might. So you can use the site regularly, try to test it out. You don't have to register or anything. If you want to make game profiles, you can register. It's real simple, and you can start creating your own game profiles and help us out. And then you can also help out all the users of the site to get more, figure out what games they would like as well. Mm-hmm. Did we miss anything, Steph?
I think that's everything.
All right. Well, thanks for watching. Again, I'm Adam.
I'm Stephanie.
And we're from theeclecticgamer.com. We'll see you next time. Bye.
Bye.